Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
On the third day there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. Jesus said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, he called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs, in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Please be seated. Grace and peace to you on this day from God our Father and our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen. So I used to have this meme on my computer that was a picture of a package store. And it was a whole long aisle full of red wine. And the signage above it said water. And the caption said, "Jesus was here." This is an amazing story. It's almost an unbelievable story. The wine had given out, and suddenly not only had Jesus brought more wine than they could ever share, but it was the best wine of them all. This is a great message for us, a message of God's great abundance and what it means for us to be in the presence of Jesus, and particularly because we tend to live our lives in scarcity. We try not to do that, but we do it all the time. We think of ourselves and we think of what we can't do, what we're not quite up for. Opportunities that may have passed us by, things we didn't quite complete that we should have, some of the shame we carry around as a result of that. We live kind of this lives of scarcity. Churches do this too. Churches think about that as well, thinking about days that once were that are no longer, or resources we wish we had which are not in front of us, or just trying to find a way to stay relevant in today's world. And of course, we see it also in the world around us. I mean, isn't our economy built on what you don't have and trying to do everything you can to get it? And even once you get it, life is still not complete until you get something else, right? I was thinking this week of the government shutdown and the politics of that aside, just thinking of the people that are directly affected. Services that are not rendered to people who need them, people who need to meet who cannot, to decide things, or the people who have to still go to work and not get paid for it. And you see the struggles in which they face. It's a scarcity that we see. And yet under the surface, just a little bit, if you look and if you pay attention, you see God's abundance at work. You may have heard stories, as I have, of congregations who are struggling, just like every congregation is struggling in today's world, to provide food services or meals, or even resources to help people pay their bills in those communities where there are military installations or airports are nearby, or a place where government meets to be able to help those people. There is abundance underneath. I saw this little story and I grabbed onto it right away, and I want to share it to you. It's a couple of tweets and a couple of people that are involved, and I'll tell you about them in a little bit. But Here is the tweet. The person's name is Taylor Futch. And she wrote, this is December 23rd, so this government shutdown has been going on this long. She said, "My husband is a park ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and he had to sign his furlough papers. We have a 4-year-old and a 4-month-old, and we don't know when the next check will come. Mortgage is due. Christmas, 2 days away." And a response to that tweet from a man named Ryan Leaf, who wrote, "You don't know me, but my grandfather was a game warden in Montana, and we spent our vacations going to 2 national parks. Anna and my son MacGyver and I would love to help with your mortgage if you will allow. Merry Christmas." So I thought, wow, what a tremendous act of generosity. What a way to live into God's abundance in the midst of perceived scarcity everywhere. And I thought, oh, who is this Ryan Leaf? That name sounds familiar to me. And so I clicked on it, and he was an NFL quarterback years ago. And then I thought to myself, okay, he's an NFL quarterback. He's got resources. He's got his popularity. He's well connected. Of course, he could do something like that, and it was very nice that he did. But what about the rest of us? Well, more on Ryan Leaf in a little bit. So this story, this wedding at Cana, John tells it to us for really good reason. And there's these little clues underneath about what it's all about. So it starts, where he introduces it by saying, on the 3rd day. Now, do you know anything in our Christian faith that happened on the 3rd day? Right? This is a foretaste. This is the Easter story. This is what it means to live the resurrection in our lives as God comes to meet us now. What does it look like? It looks like a wedding feast. And everybody's there. And Jesus is there, and the disciples are there, and his mother are there, and the people are there celebrating. What a great, great image. And then the people bring with them what we all bring with us, this perceived scarcity. The wine had run out. Now, if you lived in that shame and honor culture in a small little town like Cana, and the wine had run out, you would never hear anything but that the rest of your life, right? You were the one who had the party where the wine ran out. But what does it mean for us to be in the presence of Jesus? What does it mean to enter on the 3rd day? What is it for us to have this foretaste of the feast that is to come? What is it to be an Easter people? Fill the jars. There's 6 jars. I think John tells us this for good reason too. 7's a perfect number. It's not quite complete just yet. They're the jars of purification. We're not quite who we're supposed to be until we're in the presence of Jesus. And not just in the presence of Jesus, in the presence of the Easter Jesus who comes to us with this amazing thing. And he says, fill them up to the brim. 20 or 30 gallons each. I did the math. Let's see if you can follow me. So 20 or 30 times 6, 120 or 180 gallons. That's a lot. A modern day bottle of wine is 750 milliliters, right? If you do the conversion and do the division, 600 to 900 bottles of wine for a little party like us. It's ridiculous, right? It's out of this world insane how crazy this abundance is that just comes out of nowhere because they're in the presence of Jesus. And it's not like it's $2 Chuck at the end of the party. This is the best of the best of the best. To be in the presence of Jesus, to be in the presence of the risen Jesus, to live this in our lives, is to see this rich abundance that is greater than our wildest dreams. It's not just about stuff, it's about what Jesus brings to us. It's just like you've got the water turned to wine here. Later on in John, you have that story of the bread and the fishes, and it fills the multitude, right? It's the bread of life. It's the cup that never leaves us thirsty. It's being in the presence of Christ and what that means in our lives. When Jesus says, I've come that they would have life and have it abundantly, this is what it's all about. It's standing with Jesus on the third day, even when everybody else is clamoring for what do we do next because the wine has run out. Pretty cool. So I looked up Ryan Leaf because I wasn't quite sure what his story was. So I found out some interesting things about him. He was a quarterback. He played a few years in the NFL. He was drafted in 1998, so he played a while ago. He didn't have a very long career. He kind of washed out, actually. He wasn't quite up to par to continue. He kind of found himself in a bit of despair, a bit of depression, a bit of anger, a bit of feeling uncertain and loss. Just kind of all the things we feel when we feel like things are scarce in our lives. He went to a party. He got involved in some things he probably shouldn't have, and he found himself in a very short amount of time addicted to painkillers. And then he started to find and try to get them in any way that he could, as people who are suffering with addiction often do. And he got into trouble. And he was arrested. And he was sentenced to 32 months in jail, 9 of which were spent in rehab. And on the 28th month that he was in jail, his cellmate, who I don't know who he is or what he did to land there, but I did find out he was a veteran of both Iraq and Afghanistan, said to him, "It's time for you to stop feeling sorry for yourself. It's time to stop living this scarce life. What you and I are going to do is we're going to go down to the prison library and we are going to help people there." And so for the remaining 4 months that he was in jail, he taught other inmates how to read. And then when he was done and got out, he was trying to find himself. He found himself as a driver with some organization that was trying to help former inmates get to work or get to their parole officer, get to where they needed to go, and he would support them in that. He ended up setting up a foundation to help people who are struggling with addiction and other issues, and he's now a spokesperson for a number of other organizations. I had no idea he had turned his life around in such a powerful way. And I don't know, because they don't say that in the stories that I read about him, if he is a person of faith, or if he is a believer, or if he does belong to a church. I don't know that. But what I do know is when you see scarcity, and it seems like the only story, and then you see abundance, and then you see people living for others, and then you see trying to make other people's lives abundant too. Isn't it just like that meme that says, Jesus was here? I think about that for ourselves and what that might mean. As we think about our future and where we're going and where God is calling us, and in the midst of struggling with that and working on that and turning to each other to look to those abundant places that you can say, hey, Jesus is showing up right here. Last Sunday we had 15 teenagers and about half of their confirmation mentors here on a Sunday afternoon for like 2.5 hours. And they wanted to be here. And they wanted to be together. And they wanted to learn. And they wanted to share. And they wanted to sit in the dark with a candle in the quiet and just pray. And in a time where we're wondering, where are the kids? And what does it look like for the church into the future? Here's this just abundant moment of faith happening here in our own midst. And on Wednesday, we had a funeral here that we hosted. It wasn't for one of our people. It was for the father of one of my pastor colleagues. And we hosted it. Peggy was here, and a couple other people, and Al and I, but mostly it was their family and friends and other people they were connected to, and it was a full house, and they were together, and we sang boldly, and we heard the word proclaimed by my friend Bill Carter, and we gathered together for a meal, and it was beautiful. And the comment again and again is, what a lovely place to be. What a wonderful vibe this place gives off. What great hospitality and welcome you have shown by having us here. What abundance in the midst of perceived scarcity. And in this past week, one of our fellow members, Barbara Martin, she's in the process of entering life eternal. And she's been in hospice throughout the week. And I've been thinking a little bit about her because she's a person who always was a little bit unsettled, if you know her. Always a little skeptical, always very inquisitive, sometimes suspicious of others, and wondering what it was all about. And in these last few days, watching her and a couple of members from here and some of her friends, and of course I was there too, just witnessing this outpouring of love and care and peace in the midst of what could be turmoil. Where else does Jesus show up with that? And so for ourselves in these days, as we go about our lives, as we think about our calling as a church, as we live out in the world, I invite you to pay close attention, to look to those places where people say, well, the wine has run out, there is no more, it's over, we can't do it, there's no possibility. And think about who you are as a child of God, as someone who knows this Christ, who comes to us not only on the third day or the day that is to come, but here and now in our lives, so that when we encounter people in their fear and in their longing, and in encountering us in a real way, they can say, Jesus was here. Amen.